What's up, everybody, and welcome in. Today we have got a Tower of Fantasy tier list. That's right, me and some of the homies are going to be breaking down all of the SSR units, standard units in Tower of Fantasy to let you guys know where they fall between S tier and C tier so that you have a better idea of what characters you should build and what characters you should invest in. That being said, I am joined with the co-leaders, the co-founders of our Tower of Fantasy squad, the Hashidas. So please join me in welcoming in the homies Jel and Vic. First up, Jel, how you doing today?
I'm fine.
Good,
I'm
good.
doing
You,
good.
you excited for this tier list action?
Oh, it definitely. I'm ready to let you guys know what the real deal is.
Vic, what's going on, man? Welcome in.
Yeah, what's up, Nick?
As you can see on the screen, we have all of our tier lists. You see you've got myself, Jel, and Vic all on here with our corresponding tier list. You can see we've got some characters that we agree on. You can see we've got some characters that we disagree on, but that's why we're here to break it down for you guys, okay? The strength of many opinions rather than just one guy on the internet telling you guys what you should do. Also, when we made these tier lists, I did put a couple stipulations on the tier list here. I said no more than 2 characters can be in S tier, but then I also asked that we keep every tier between 1 and 3 characters. We try to keep an even spread on the units here, so that's kind of why the layout is there, just to keep you guys informed. To kick things off, we do agree on a couple of the characters, that first character being Shiro. Okay, we all agree that Shiro is B tier. For me personally, it just comes down to the fact that as it stands with Shiro, her damage output just simply ain't it. Jel, what do you think? Why did you put Shiro in B tier?
And I can see why you say that she doesn't do that much damage. At the same time, I don't think it's terrible. Maybe it's my gear, but it's not terrible. And then looking at her stars, she doesn't start popping off until the 3rd star, of course, when she's able to reset the whole team's cooldown. And that's pretty significant. If I could, I would have put her like right behind King, strictly because I don't think Shiro should be on the same level as Crow and Huma. If I could do B+, she would be there, but as it stands, that's where she is.
Another one of the characters that we all agreed on here was Cocoritter. We all have her in C tier. Unfortunate for Cocoritter, but somebody's got to be on the bottom rung of the tier list. And for me, I truly think that Cocoritter is the best pure healer in the game. Problem being, I don't necessarily view a pure healer as a very necessary unit. When we get to have 3 units, and there are other units in the game like Nemesis, for example, that has decent attack and can heal. Zero, who can do some shielding, who can do some damage and can heal. Having somebody that I kind of view as a pure healing unit just kind of fits out of the rotation more than fits in. But Vic, you also had Cocoritter in C tier. Why do we have her there?
I kind of agree with you as well. A pure healer in the standard banner is really good for a niche healing comp, but in terms of just, we get 3 slots, and for even in the ice comp, she doesn't provide damage. I feel like sustain-wise, we can make foods to kind of sustain our health, but in terms of, you know, like ruins and progressing story, the slot's better used for damage, and unfortunately Cocoritter does have to go to C tier, but she's fantastic in my opinion.
A good unit, but maybe just a little bit too niche in a game that damage really does help out. But that was the easy ones. Those were the units that all of us agreed on. Here is where the disagreeing begins. If you guys have noticed, Jel and Vic ended up having the exact same tier list as far as who's on S, A, B, and C. My tier list is the odd man out, the one that kind of differentiates amongst the group. So I'm going to be going through and explaining my positioning on some of these characters, and then I'm going to have the rebuttals come from the homies, from Jel and from Vic, as to why we differ a little bit, why we have some of these units a little bit higher or a little bit lower than one another. Starting off with King. So I personally put King in S tier. To me, he's got to go in S tier because he does have pretty good damage output. He is an attack unit that has a really good shatter. That's kind of the main point for me. Not only can he give you the attack resonance, but he can also serve as your shield breaker if you don't have somebody else to use in your team, like a Huma, like a Meryl. King really gets the job done while allowing you to keep attack resonance, and it gives the flexibility in the last spot where if you do want to run a healer, you do want to run a Zero, you want to run a Cocoritter, if you have Nemesis as a limited unit. To me, I just can't overlook the flexibility that King provides with the team comp. That's why I had to put him at the top tier. However, Vic, you only had him in A tier. Why only A? Why not the S tier?
Well, I think King is fantastic, especially at C1. He becomes probably the best shatter in the standard banner, right? But this is my thing about shatter weapons in general. A shatter weapon with great attack is good, but the thing is, you will not be using King past shield breaking. And the thing about his shield break, it's really good, but here's the thing: you will break the shield and then you'll switch to your DPS weapon. His best method of shattering is his aerial maneuver, and is 3 neutral hold, neutral attack, and hold, but it can be interrupted. If it's interrupted, you'll be losing not only DPS DPS, but you'll be losing shield break, which is really important in JOs. And JOs, if you don't break the shield, you guys are pretty screwed. So, like, honestly, that's my thought process with King. And to be fair, with the other standard banner shield breakers that you could potentially have, or if you use what you got, but that's why I feel that King really doesn't shine, is because his shield break potential, it gets negated if he is interrupted.
Without spoiling too much about these future characters we're going to talk about, I think that was a really nice lead in, and we're still giving King some roses. Putting him in A tier is definitely no joke, but pretty decent reasons laid out. Another one that we have just barely differentiating on is Samir. I, again, put Samir in S tier. However, the fellas here only have her in A. I had to put her in S tier. To me, she is the strongest standard SSR unit when it comes to just pure damage output. I think Samir excels in both single target and AoE, particularly in AoE. If you guys have used Samir, if you've been around a Samir user, then you already know the jump in the air and the spinning, just damage everywhere. She's very easy to plug into a team comp and just straight up be the one that stays on field and does your damage. That's why, to me, if I'm looking at these units as who's gonna get the job done for me, and as we mentioned, Tower Fantasy, you do got to be able to get some damage done. I think Samir fits that build fully, but Jel only has her in A tier. Why? Why couldn't you put her at the top, Jel? Tell me.
Well, I'll let you know. Samir, in my opinion, is the best Volt character in the game. I will give her that. She has everything. She has damage. She can do some safe damage by holding in her attack and just, bang, 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 just shoot away. Her stars are pretty nice as well. She has a little venti vacuum at a certain star, which nobody really talks about, but it's actually pretty nice, comfortable to have. I bet he's saying all of these nice things about Samir. What has to be the problem? She has a lot of downtime when she's done doing her spin to win, which isn't her fault. It's in her kit. She does a lot of damage when she's in it, but at the same time, all that downtime is really hard to plug in somebody to fill in that void. That's not the only reason though. I know we're not supposed to move on to this yet, but you see I have Tsubasa at the top. I just don't think she provides the same thing as Tsubasa. She doesn't provide the same usefulness as Tsubasa. Can I elaborate on Tsubasa, or that's not my place
hang
right
in
now?
there, hang in there.
Hang in there? Okay.
You're getting a little bit ahead.
Okay,
We don't want to spoil too much. The next unit that we do have, though, again, we're only differentiating by one tier here, but I put Huma as A tier, whereas the fellas here have her at B tier. To me, I have King in S tier because I think King is an attack unit that does a great job with Shatter. I could only put Huma one tier below because I think Huma is a Shatter unit with a great potential for damage here. I think she's kind of the reverse of King. She does phenomenal as far as her shield break goes. I remember very early in the beta, before I knew anything that was going on, this is like my first week's experience with all these units, and Huma was one of my first that I pulled, doing specifically, it was 81k damage when I was only level 20 in the game, didn't have my armor correct, didn't have any of my matrix correct, and Huma was still putting out massive damage, screenshot damage numbers, and I know it's only going to get higher and higher when you have her with proper gear, proper matrix, if you've got some stars on her. So I just think Huma's a great Shatter unit that can also get you some really nice damage per screenshot numbers, so I had to keep her pretty high up on the list. But again, the fellas here, they're disagreeing with me a tier low. Vic, why only B tier for Huma?
I think you're not wrong with it. Unfortunately, Huma had to go to B for me. She does do a fantastic amount of damage, and her shield break is fantastic. I even think around C1 and above, compared to the other shield break, she is better than them at that level. But I say at C6, when she's even able to heal herself, she is probably one of the premier tank weapons, which is where it goes her downfall for me. But my tier list is based on team, and if you say you're not doing a tank resonance team and you use her taunt, guess what? All the aggro is going to you. If you're ready or not, all the aggro is you. That's something that a lot of people actually don't ever think about with Huma. She's a fantastic character to have though. Regardless where I put her in that tier list, she's still good.
That's a pretty fair breakdown, man. But moving on to the next one, this has been a pretty interesting character throughout their still short lifespan here in the game, but we've got Crow. Again, differentiating between A tier and B tier here. I do gotta give Crow some flowers here as a very, very special single target damage dealer. With Crow's attack patterns and with his skill and his burst, I think those kind of masquerade as AoE damage. I've seen some people try to make the case for Crow. Oh no, he can damage groups of mobs. To me, that's real big copium. His skill and his burst are simply there to just give him an extra bit of damage on a single target. When you're fighting Crow with the bosses, I think he does really well. He does have pretty good damage output, as I've said, but I can't put him any higher than A. As some of us maybe know, when he had the jetpack, you were able to do extremely high damage with him. I never utilized that play style just because I had Samir Samir, and I think that Samir is the better of the units, but I know that Jel has some experience with that. So Jel, let me know, man, why B tier for Crow, and what do you think that nerf to the jetpack tech kind of did to his kit?
I'm gonna say this right now. It's not just the nerf to the jetpack. That was rightfully deserved. What I am kind of mad about is that they actually touched his kit. They didn't say they did, but after doing some testing, they slowed down his drill, thus lowering his damage overall. That's a huge factor. I never thought that they would touch his kit outright. They didn't say anything. I just had to test it out myself. That did knock him down, but still, I think he's the best single target damage dealer in the game, by far. Even with that, his stars are pretty nice as well. His premier one, to me, is probably his 3-star. He's still good at pretty much 0 in terms of single target. You said something about his skill earlier. That skill there is a complete nuke. If you pair that with Shiro's C3, if you're able to get that and you reset his cooldown, you can take a boss's health from 5 bars to 1, because if you stand up against a boss with Crow and use his skill, all of those little mini swords that he throws out, they hit the boss at once, and that's a lot of damage. Jetpack Crow isn't completely gone. You can still reach the max height, and if you can find the right sweet spot, you can still get those stabs in. But they touched his kit, man. I can't believe they did that.
It is interesting.
I do want to add one thing. I did overlook the 1-star. Probably one of the best ones in the game as far as DPS goes. You just need one backstab and you get crit. Backstabbing an electrified target increases crit rate by 100%, and they give you 30% crit damage.
If you can maximize Crow's playstyle and get those backstabs, it can definitely boost. But let's go ahead and move on to our next unit. We're going to be talking about Meryl. I have Meryl B tier, whereas Jel and Vic have got her in A tier. I was forced to use Meryl because she, I believe, was the first unit that I pulled here in Global, but I am not a fan of it for all of the great things that Meryl does. Vic mentioned it earlier, talking about interruption when you're trying to shield break. That's maybe one of the most underrated parts of Meryl's kit. It's just so extremely valuable that when you go into her charge attack, when you go into her Beyblade mode, nothing's gonna stop that. She glows yellow, she almost like hits that Super Saiyan form, and she can't be stopped. She's great for that, as well as her ice cage is really good for knocking down that shield. However, I had to drop her on the tiers because she is the #1 co-op team killer in all of Tower of Fantasy, and it's not even close. For as good as the ice cage can be utilized for breaking shield and even trapping enemies in some instances, but at what cost? I couldn't put Meryl A tier or any higher, knowing that she has probably caused as many, if not more, casualties on the boss fighting battlefield than the bosses do themselves. But I'm excited to hear Vic defend her. Vic, why A tier?
Let's go ahead and talk about the cage. The cage can be used as evil as the user will allow it to be, because if you can communicate when the cage comes down, it's very good for keeping mobile bosses and JOs or world bosses in check, which can increase the chances of you breaking a shield. And then on that note, Meryl probably has the best shield breaking kit in the standard banner. The CC immunity from the Beyblade move is probably one of the highest in percentage in my opinion, probably by fact too. I just don't have my stats in front of me. But at 1-star, she's able to heal herself actually. So there's a sustain that way. At 3 stars, on the switch end, she grants herself a shield. So now not only is she actually activate CC immunity, she's able to bring in a shield. She is good for healing once you break the shield, because unlike King, she will not be interrupted. She will be able to heal you, and she will probably be able to break the shield, which is the most important thing in my opinion. Damage is important, but when you have your shield breaking weapon out, you want it to do what? You want it to break the shield.
Facts.
That's it.
And just to give her a little bit more flowers, I don't think her damage output is bad. I actually think that she's got a pretty fun play style. But as I mentioned, all of those benefits that you guys talked about, all those perks, all of those pluses in her kit, Meryl just be catching too many bodies on the wrong team, in my opinion. I just can't overlook it. We're going to move on to a character that we have a pretty decent discrepancy on now. I personally have Zero relatively high up at A tier, whereas the fellas here have got Zero down all the way in the depths of C tier. I think I'm looking at this a different way than Vic and then Jel are looking at this. Objectively, I don't think his damage output is very good. I think in order to really unlock his potential, you've got to get his first star. But Zero is a very flexible unit, and I'm sure a lot of the people watching this, we've all played Genshin, and something that I look forward to in Genshin is not necessarily a character that can just do damage, but the characters that are extremely flexible. And I think that Zero kind of fits that mold from a Tower of Fantasy perspective if you're willing to invest in him. Just the fact that he can heal, he can shield, he can do damage. I think that Zero is very flexible, but the real kicker here, I'm looking out for the people. Zero brings a whole new element into the gameplay, which is that AFK farming. And yeah, maybe that doesn't help him out on the battlefield, maybe that doesn't help you out with your team comp, but it does help out with your progression in the game. It helps out with your cooking, it helps out if you're a mount farmer. Being able to have a character like Zero that has a specialty nuance in his kit that kind of opens up more possibilities in the game. Maybe it's Copium that I'm ranking him this high because of it, but when I look at my tier list, I'm looking at the units that I think are going to best benefit these players, and I think having Zero at least available to you is a huge plus over some of these other characters that maybe don't have the best damage, the best healing, the best shield breaking. Zero might not be the best at any of those, but he's got it in his kit, and he gives that AFK farming potential. So, as somebody that's got Zero all the way down in C tier, Jel, I know you use Zero a lot in the beta. Why the bottom tier?
There's a really good reason for that. I'm gonna let you know that right now. As you said before, I wanted to look at this from like 0 star all the way up to 6 star. His first star is really good. I find great value in it. He's able to finally heal. He reduces his cooldown from 60 to 30 seconds on his skill. Oh, I didn't even talk about his skill. He gives everyone a shield. That's really nice. Then we move on to 5. Wow, he's able to give the team attack percent. That's kind of nice.
Bro, why are you hyping him up if you have him in C tier? I don't understand. Don't give me all the good reasons. Why in C tier?
I gotta set my case. I gotta set my case.
Dude, I don't know how you're gonna bring this back. Please, sorry for interrupting.
Oh, yeah, he gives the team some nice attack percentages at 5 star. But realistically, who's gonna get there? I wanted to cut off to be at 3 star because I think that's where most people are gonna be at this point. He's a pretty solid unit. I had to put him this low because I couldn't confidently, like everyone above him, they have a place in every team, in their own respective teams. Zero, on the other hand, he's there if you're strictly running healing, support. He doesn't do that much damage. He's the charged unit for the healers because no damage dealer in their right mind is going to be on Zero doing their normal attack and spamming that to get their energy back just to do a discharge and switch back to him. That's a DPS loss there. I just don't see him being above them.
You saying that like maybe he doesn't fit above the other characters is probably the strongest argument, but I think you gave him a lot of props, homie. Let's transition to the next character, and this is perfect timing too, because both of you chose as your only S tier character, Tsubasa. This is the biggest differentiator amongst this entire tier list. I have Tsubasa all the way down in C tier, whereas you guys have her as the sole member of the S tier. For me, I actually really enjoy the bow playstyle. I mess around and use the blue rarity bow a lot early game, and I think all of the bows have pretty similar playstyles as far as they've got really quick cooldowns on their skill, they've got pretty decent mobility when you're using these skills, and a decent AoE. Tsubasa has all of that, but of course amplified because she is the SSR golden version of these characters, and Tsubasa has a really nice piece in her kit for buffing. That being said, I don't think Tsubasa's just playstyle on her own is that much more fun than any of the characters that I've put higher than her as far as like the actual damage dealers, the people that you want on field often. I don't necessarily find myself enjoying playing Tsubasa more than somebody like a King or a Samir that I personally have in S tier. I think her real value comes from having those stars, specifically her 1 star, and then being able to buff the rest of the team. To me, it's not nearly as valuable. It kind of forces you to get her 1 star, and it forces you to play a certain way, burning up all 3 of your dodges to get that maximum buff, whereas a lot of the characters that I consider to be higher on the tier list, I like for them to have their dodges. I like for them to be able to move in a certain way to maximize their playstyle. It's similar to what you were saying about Zero. For me, Tsubasa just ends up fitting out more than she fits in. But clearly you guys are going to have a much stronger opinion on the other side. So Vic, explain to the people, why is she your only unit in S tier?
First of all, S tier waifu. At 1 star, you're right. At 1 star, 6 star, she does get the buff. And what makes her so good is the buff is universal for every team. Any team that you can think of that wants to do damage, they can slot in Tsubasa. And as a standard banner character, that you're able to even get some copies. So getting her to use the 6 star to be able to maximize the stacks that will allow your DPS to do more damage. In fact, she actually becomes more of a DPS later in stars, but she is very good at 1 star, which makes her very free to play. You know, you get lucky or you use gold, black gold. It's a little bit of an investment, not crazy. I think I do agree with you that, I mean, in terms of DPS, they're usually ready to go at 0 for standard banner. But with Tsubasa, she's really going to be your premier support unit. And you did bring up the dodges. I get you there too. But at 3-star, 1 dodge can actually get all 3 of the stacks. So 3-star is lots of convenience. I think Tsubasa is just fantastic in every role. Future-proof unit as well. Probably the most future-proof unit at that.
Dude, fair enough. Yeah, maybe she doesn't become a more advanced DPS unit until like higher investment, but she does play a very flexible role in team comp, so I could understand that a little bit.
I wanted to add one more thing to Tsubasa. It's the 1-star. To get all 3 stacks, you don't necessarily need the 3rd star. If you're fighting a mob of enemies and you do 1 dodge attack and that 1 arrow goes through 3 enemies, you get the stacks right then and there as well.
That's definitely a little niche thing that I didn't know myself. Maybe a little bit more valuable when fighting within mobs if you can trigger all 3. We are going to come together as a group, as the 3 amigos, the 3 leaders of Hashidas. Can we come together and decide a final tier list?